The following hour of World Watchers is made possible in part by Lowdown, a leading manufacturer of microcomputer peripherals located in Scotts Valley. For more information, call 438-7400. The telephone has been ringing. There's a new switch here. We'll see how it works this evening. It was changed because of some problems on the board. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, Mae. Am I getting through?
Well.
Okay, sounds like I am.
JT, the phone was ringing. What's wrong? Come in, JT.
Yeah,
She stayed this evening to see. Huh?
Yeah. I
don't hear him at all, whoever he is.
Hello?
Oh.
Can you hear me?
JT said, he's on. The switch on the right wasn't down. Yes, he's on now. Okay.
Okay, good. Yeah, those are my initials. Won't go any further than that. But
okay.
Three things I wanted to share with you and the people.
Okay.
You probably wanted to get this on the air, but you didn't. In Sunday's paper on the story that started in the front section, it was a Mercury special edition story with a Mercury News writer. It was about the Moon Church funneling millions of dollars to American conservatives. Richard Vagary's picture was in the story. His smiling baby face gleamed out at us all. And it was really a very revealing story. It said a lot of the things that you were saying about the Moon Organization helping out these conservatives. A lot of other conservatives were split off from that, saying tried to distance themselves from it and said to the conservatives who were accepting money, don't do that. It's the kiss of death.
Well, I believe, and I've said this before, that Reverend Moon's money came in 1954. And I believe it was the money of the Borman Brotherhood. I've had that for years, that money, that Vita Perone died in 1952, and the money was released to Otto Skorzeny out of the Swiss bank. She conveniently expired of cancer, and it unleashed the Nazi money, and then Ryosha Sasakawa, the war criminal, gave it to Reverend Moon. Then he links up, of course, down in Bolivia with Klaus Barbie, in Argentina with the death squads, with Himmler's death squads. There is a direct relationship of Moon to the Gestapo, death squads, Nazism in Germany and in Japan.
Yeah. See, as I've said before, Martin Bormann has been, since the end of the war, has pretty much been given de facto, if not realistic control of the worldwide Nazi movement. Martin Bormann's been in charge of it.
Well, Martin Bormann was the genius behind the banking, the money.
Yeah.
And Rudolf Hess was the genius behind the geography of South and Central America in order to eventually take the world. And Hallmar Schacht was the genius of the German banking that connected his father-in-law, Otto Skorzeny. Skorzeny going between Spain and all of them working for the CIA.
Yeah, Martin Bormann, I must remind our listeners that Martin Bormann was the one that had the famous quote. He told Hitler, your policies are far too lenient. You're not being harsh enough or strict enough.
Yeah, and
then it could get worse.
That's right. Read Martin Bormann, Nazi in Exile, by Mr. Manning.
Ladislas Farrago wrote that.
No, Manning.
Oh, yeah.
Manning, of the Wall Street Journal, the very leftist Wall Street Journal. You couldn't be more conservative. Mm-hmm. And this is where that 1954 funding, the unleashing of this money went to Moon, who then became active in the United States with Richard Nixon. Of course, see, Mr. Charles Willoughby, the gentleman I've talked about so much, his name is Carl Wiedenbach, and he was chief of intelligence for all of Douglas MacArthur's work in the Philippines and with Navy over in the Pacific. And he trained at the Kriegs Academy with Mr. Wiedemeyer, Albert Wiedemeyer. And that's where Moon comes in. He becomes a representative of the Third Reich through the Asian connections of the Kriegs Academy in Germany.
Yeah, the old Far Eastern militarism of the Japanese and the Koreans has been kept alive with the Kuomintang and the Chiang Kai-shek business.
Yeah. See, well, I believe
all that.
That's right. I believe there was a bridge. The common denominator was the Kriegs Academy, which is Hitler's West Point.
Right.
And out of there comes Wiedemeyer, who is in the Pacific, and Wiedenbach, who is sent to our Allied forces under Douglas MacArthur, and then Fritz Kramer comes from Germany, the United States, and Wiedenbach stays in the Pacific.
Yeah.
One more thing. In 1960, when Vagary helped form the Young Americans for Freedom, Willoughby, Charles Wiedenbach, Wiedenbach was on the board with Ronald Reagan in 1960. That's when the California blends with the Kriegs Academy and the Pacific and the Moon Forces.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I wanted to mention two other things here pretty quick. Cover them. Once you mentioned a couple times recently about the 1st Earth Battalion. That is a plan to put together all the armies of the world for a globalism, but that is not a Nazi international plan. That's a plan from the other side, and I'll mention this word again. The 1st Earth Battalion is the international army, or will be the international army of the Illuminati. Yeah. Now, I just wanted to mention that. Shifting over to something, the last thing I wanted to mention here, shifting over to this, is that Winston Churchill, even though he did what you said he did, Winston Churchill didn't want the occult aspect of Nazism revealed for the simple reason that he was part of the Druids, and I've seen a picture in a book about the Druids, about his initiation into the Druids. There's a photograph and a story about that. And he didn't want to reveal that because he was part of an occult force called the Druids, which is the leadership in the Illuminati, which was fighting the Nazis, which broke away from them in 1919. So if the Nazi occultism was revealed, the Illuminati Druidic occultism would also be revealed.
Well, that's what I said.
The whole thing, the whole house of cards would have fallen down.
Well, that's what I say. He had to be a part of something that, just as Earl Warren was, they were all 33-degree Masons. They all had to be part of something because all the judges were in agreement. And we won't tell you what motivated these people, and by not telling you, they assured their resurrection or maintaining it alive.
Yeah, I just wanted. Yeah, you're right. I just wanted to reveal the details of what was going on.
I appreciate.
Most Masons are up in that degree, 30th through 33rd degree, they're members of the Illuminati. That's on that side. But then, of course, the Knights of Saint Jerusalem of Saint John and Knights of Malta. That's the other side. That's the Nazi side. I wanted to say one more thing. I'll get off. Nazism basically comes in 4 parts. And they all cooperate together, but the dominant part of Nazism is atheistic, scientific, materialistic Nazism, the Nazism of the Nazi scientists. Yeah. And then there's the satanic Nazism, which is an arm of it that works with them, which is very significant and important. I'm glad you and I are talking about that. Then there's the quote-unquote Christian Nazism, which uses the new right or Christians as a front, and that's about all they're used for. Mm-hmm. And then there's quote-unquote another aberrant of Nazism, which Nazism doesn't even recognize, is called pan-Nazism, which all the doctrine of Nazism applies, except all races are equal. Yeah. The other 3 Nazi groups hate that kind, and it's... okay, well, thank you, Mae, and I'll get off and let some other people get on.
Thanks for calling.
I'm glad I could share.
Okay. Yeah, it's great to hear. I now... Just as I studied more about Franklin Roosevelt, when I thought I knew a lot about him, I'm certainly no expert. I was reading Robinson Jeffers' poetry and his explanation of or aspersions against Roosevelt. I'll have to read more about Churchill now and bone up on him, read a little differently what I might have read before. Hello, you're on the air.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, Mae. I've been listening to you for some time, and I've really liked what I've heard, and it's helped me a lot. And it's only because I value your insights and your information so much that I had to call and tell you that I think you are completely off base on this.
Okay.
And I'd like to tell you why. First of all, I think...
off base on this. Now,
on the occult.
On the occult, okay.
First of all, to lump the Satanism with occultism is just simply bad scholarship.
Oh, it is, huh? Define occultism, then.
All Satanists are is reverse Christians.
Yeah.
Okay.
They worship the devil.
All occultism is not reduced to Satanism.
Uh-huh.
Most Satanists are really sort of Hollywood showbiz people that really couldn't put together a real pagan ritual.
Okay, well, let me just say right there that if Michael Aquino learned Satanism under psychological warfare in Vietnam and formed the Church of Set, which was allowed and is allowed continuously now, is that Hollywood?
Well, I don't know.
Is Hollywood Vietnam? Is Hollywood Vietnam?
I don't think that that's relevant information. That may or may not be true.
Well...
And
I don't think Michael Aquino's home with his Nazi uniforms and his Waffen SS, his videos, and his love of Nazism that he professes in his rituals. Is that Hollywood?
Well, I think serious occultists would not recognize themselves in any way as Satanists or evil people.
Well, I asked you to define a cult. Define Satan. What's a cult?
Let me give you what I feel is a practical working definition of the occult.
Okay.
Maybe we're just quibbling about semantics here.
Okay.
The occult is everything that has been suppressed by the dominator religion for 2,000 years, everything that existed as a worldview, all the doctrines that were suppressed, and all the books that were burned, and all the heretics that were burned. There is a long, long tradition that has been called the occult or the esoteric in other terms, that has existed side by side and underneath Christianity for centuries and centuries and centuries.
Do other people connect Satan with the occult, or just my references?
I think a lot, the people that cannot distinguish between, just like anything else, everything has its shadow side.
Yeah.
And certainly the occult has its shadow side. But that doesn't mean all occultists are Nazis or all occultists are Satanists.
Okay, that's a good point.
And I just wanted to bring that out. And I think I know you know that, because I know you're very well read in these subjects.
Yeah.
But when you present it to people who I think haven't had any experience in these matters, I think it's a little bit misleading.
Well, maybe I'm too inclusive with the occult. Maybe I'm referring to the Satanists and the occult, those occult that practice Satanism, but there's occults that don't.
Yes.
Okay.
The other point I wanted to make is with the Nazis and the occult, I have read these books. I read The Spear of Destiny, and I read the other main book, which is The Occult in the Third Reich by Engelberg.
Dusty Sklar wrote one too.
And these books, I don't know how much you've read on the other side, but I would take these books with a grain of salt.
We'll see.
I think you could make a pretty good. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, I think you could make a pretty good argument out of the fact that when we look at Nazism as you want to look at it as a pseudo-religion or a satanic religion or some sort of political movement, then you have to look at what they've done. I mean, it isn't, if you look at history, when you look back to see where the Nazis got their model, it wasn't these poor heretics who were claimed to be witches and Satanists by the church that were going around murdering Jews at random.
Yes.
It was the Christian communities in the Middle Ages
the Inquisition.
who went around. It was the Crusaders in the Rhineland who said, hey, we don't have to go and fight the infidel Arab over here. We have infidels right in our midst, the Jews.
Yeah,
and we should root them out.
Like the Americans did with the Indians.
These were good Christians.
Yes, yeah.
And I think the fact is that, yes, maybe a few of the Nazis dabbled in the occult, but the SS wore belt buckles that said that they were in the service of God, and they didn't mean the satanic God. They meant the Judeo-Christian God.
It was Judeo-Christian,
all these people this was a Christian country.
Yes.
The morality was Christian that let this happen.
Yes.
And I think the other thing I wanted to say, and I think it's very dangerous to find, I think it's very Christian to find a scapegoat.
Yes.
To say, it is not, it makes us, this conspiratorial cult theory makes us feel, well, it's all these bad people over here who are in the occult, and not us, and not the kind of values that we've had been indoctrinated for 2,000 years.
Well, I think you make a good point. I mean,
with the drugs, I think you're off with Aldous Huxley. You're right on with Robertson Jeffers. But the people who are screaming the loudest about Aldous Huxley and the Beatles and consciousness movement raising drugs are the Christians who are afraid, okay, Antichrist is just around the corner, and those are the fundamentalists. After Huxley, there was a great, we want to talk about witch hunts, all those newspaper stories, most of them were fabricated about the LSD murders. There was a real witch hunt against these people, and I think it was the Christian mentality who were behind creating this hysteria over the occult and over drugs, and it goes on today. The new mysticism. We got to get rid of that. And I think when you
But it was also the Mellons and Timothy Leary and the very far right that was supplying the LSD.
Well, have you read, let's take a typical book. Have you read The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow?
No.
Well, it's one of these facile Christian books that looks at the New Age and sees the Antichrist again.
It has another title, I think.
Well, it may have been published in another country. I have it under, but again, what I think is happening is, people who misunderstand the occult, they are swayed by these Christian arguments, these paranoid fundamentalist arguments that, we're in people trying to break out of the mindset that they've been under for 2,000 years and find some new way to look at the world, some new way to relate to whatever they call religious, keep getting put down and keep being branded as heretics. So people can't really start thinking for themselves.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, it could be that the Nuremberg trial could have challenged the own, as you say, Hitler actually was Catholic and used von Weizsäcker as his liaison to the Vatican. So all of this was religious and Christian, more than a cult. When you mention it and think about it, it was a religion, a Christian religion that was doing it.
Well, yes, and now this is my personal view, and I don't want to say this is the truth, but I feel that, as far as the teaching of Jesus, Jesus said, by the fruits ye shall know them. You look at the history of Christianity.
Yes.
And it seems like the final fruit of Christianity is Nazism.
Yeah, well, I think you get a perfect example in a country like Israel where we talk about Judeo-Christian, and are we going to blame the occult or Himmler for the way the Israelis act? They're acting as bad as the Nazis.
Exactly, because
to the Palestinians, and look at the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. Now, they couldn't be more brutal to an entire group of people, and we certainly can't blame the Thule Society. It's Judaism and it's Christianity.
Well, on a large scale, if you can see anything satanic or evil on a large scale, what the Judeo-Christian or monotheistic religions have done is clearly, to me, satanic.
Yes, and also
murdering indigenous people, wiping out the Indians, burning women.
Yeah, look at Central and South America that's been a Christian country. Forget the Thule Society and the occult.
Right.
And we have decimated native populations for hundreds of years.
Yes.
Okay, listen, that's a good point, and I really appreciate your calling.
Well, thank you you for your openness and listening to me.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, these are, you try to find, maybe he's right, you try to find a scapegoat for what is accounting for the evil, and it's really us. It isn't. You don't have to look very far. It's really our society. You're on the air.
Yeah, hello. Okay. In reference to this gentleman's just last call here, this Trevor Ravenscroft wrote 2 books. The Spear of Destiny, talking about the occultism and the Nazis and that, and not looking at that as just being naive, I think, because nobody can slaughter 6 million people unless it's a religious movement.
Uh-huh.
But in any case, Trevor Ravenscroft wrote a book called The Cup of Destiny, which is about the Grail stories and Christian mysticism. So
Uh-huh.
there is a plus side to the occult thing. But I thought the thing with you mentioning that gal saying that the spear was in West Point was real interesting, because in the Spear of Destiny, he describes where Himmler had a very exact duplicate of the spear made for his own personal use, and that when the quote-unquote Spear of Destiny was found by the Allies in this tunnel-type thing towards the end of the war, as soon as I read that, I just knew that it was the fake that they found that Himmler had made himself, and I kind of wondered, well, what did happen to the real one? Because I knew there was no doubt in my mind that the Nazis would leave their most precious religious symbol in a damn cave. You know, they took it with them wherever they went. And speaking of which, this Nazis Go Underground, who is the author of that, and where might it be found? Because I tried to find the Gods and Beasts, and it's out of print, and nobody carries it. So,
have you tried Tom Davis Research up in Capitola? He may have. Now, the Nazis Go Underground. It's written by Kurt Reiss, R-E-I-S-S, published in 1944. And it's a very small book. It's out. If it's out of print, maybe Tom and I could copy them. We've done this with the Torbit document and other books that were hard to get, and sold them as reprints because they're not available anymore. This is one that everybody should own. And just as a fluke, a friend of mine, a world watcher, was at the Monterey Library where they have a table where they sell books that are cast aside, and she found it about 8 years ago for 25 cents on a rack at the Monterey Library. I would never have known about that book, and I've gotten more people to get it, and gone through Tom Davis, and he's gone up and down the coast, and we've tried to locate copies as a book dealer that in Berkeley. If you write to me or call me, I'll give you the address and see if you can find it. And if they're not available...
Would he be listed in the book in Capitola?
The store is Aries Arts.
Aries Arts.
Yeah, and see if he has a copy. And if they're out, we really should copy it and get them available for people because... You know, with this Himmler's name, he was behind all of that, and with Himmler's names with the UN files, it appears and reappears with Michael Aquino and everybody. Everyone should know what he planned 2 years after the war because it webs in with Allen Dulles and the OSS that became the CIA. It's a very important book.
Also, this... I don't know, back a few shows ago when you were talking about Roosevelt and the Nazis and that, and I felt a little dubious about that. Not that I always believe you, but sometimes dubiously. And I happened to be going through...
You believe me dubiously.
Well, now I believe you completely.
No.
I was going through the New York Times indexes, and what I was looking for was some references to Hitler and occultism, back in the 30s and 40s. And oddly enough, there is absolutely zero.
No, nothing. Zero.
Nothing at all.
Zero.
Right.
I mean, my library of thousands of Nazi books, there's only 4 on the occult.
But while I was searching through stuff, I happened to see a little abstract where it said that it was around September 24th of 44, Roosevelt, the caption was, Roosevelt cites Mein Kampf, Dewey demands retraction. So much
you
for
mean
my
he was
skepticism.
Quoting it?
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Sometimes you see those things, make a copy and send it to me. Yes,
okay.
That's priceless.
Okay. Oh, and by the way, I was the fellow that gave you that book by Bill Everson.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. I wanted to thank you. It's great. And it's autographed by the author.
Yeah, I'm glad you appreciate it. Well, he's my next-door neighbor by Davenport here, and he's got a whole bunch of stuff on Jeffers that I'm sure that he's got a little library in that.
He's an author, for listeners who don't know, on poets and writers on the West Coast here. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have another copy? You gave me an autographed one. I felt badly, taking it from you. Do you have some of his?
Oh yeah, that's no problem. No, he did that for you because I told him that I was that you had mentioned Jeffers on your show, and he anybody that likes Jeffers he likes. So
great.
I asked him if maybe he might have something that that he could give you that.
Oh, this is a listener who's calling in who went to one of the Kazoo potluck dinners and brought me an autographed copy from an author on the book, The Writers on the West Coast, and things about Robinson Jeffers. Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank him, okay?
I sure will.
I really do appreciate it. I show it to a lot of people. I really do appreciate it.
And I really appreciate that you're going into this occultism and the Nazis, because I happen to be native German myself, and I went through, in my middle 20s and that, trying to come to some kind of an understanding of just, how that whole thing occurred. And in my research, I did happen to find that Spear of Destiny, and it's just, it's completely clear now. It was most certainly an occult movement.
Well, what became so clear to me was when I began to read about Michael Aquino, Lieutenant Colonel, learning Satanism, which is the antithesis of Christianity, and starting a church while in the armed forces of Vietnam. If you're having separation of church and state, and he's in psychological training and psychological mind washing, that branch, and he's teaching to worship Satan while he's paid by the taxpayers to serve the country in Vietnam. He's turning the various soldiers in. A perfect example is David Berkowitz, who went over as a nice Jewish boy and comes home a Christian and becomes part of the occult and does the mass murders with the assistance of members of Satanism in New York City, and that's what Vietnam brought to him.
Yeah.
And he wasn't sent over to do that. He was sent over to defend the United States of America.
Okay, the very last thing on this thing with, you said it was Honecker that said that she felt that the...
Barbara Honecker felt, now, I maybe misquoted her last time, I thought it was at Annapolis. She told me that she heard when she was in Washington, and she was with a lot of people very high up in the White House and cabinet level, she heard that the spear was in West Point.
Oh, God, because I'll tell you, if that real spear really is there, I think we're in big trouble.
If Himmler isn't in the grave, and if Fritz Kramer of the National Security Council, the plans officer for the Pentagon, is sharing space with Daniel Graham of Star Wars. Graham was head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Michael Aquino was stationed at the Defense Intelligence Agency in 1981. We are in very big trouble. And you can see by everything happening in this country, we are in trouble.
Well, thanks for your show.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Okay, 3753082. This is Mae Brussell, and they fixed the board this week. There's a new switch, so we're having a good time. Hello, you're on the air.
God, it's nice to get in on the phone.
Yeah, the phone switch was fixed.
The phone is hot tonight.
Okay.
I called last week, and I just wanted to make a more direct thing because I was talking and the phone blew up about the latest Center for Defense Information bulletin all about first strike nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I just came across that article this week, the Star Wars First Strike.
Well, the Trident II D5 missile and the Sea Launch Cruise missile, they're doing, this great thing of taking all these cruise missiles out of Germany and then just putting them on the Trident subs.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's all just going to go out into the oceans where they really don't have to worry about vulnerability anyways.
Where John Lehman cooked this up with Henry Kissinger and Kramer again. That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Two other things. One, it seems so tragic and pathetic that the Iran-Contra thing seems to just be fading fast and fast and fast. But I keep thinking that Casey is to Iran-Contra what Oswald is to Kennedy's death.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And that sooner or later...
Or Hitler was to World War II. They take one man, or Nixon was to Watergate. They take one man, and then everything else is hunky-dory.
Pin it on him, and he's already dead, so he's not talking, so we can all, he can just be the total lame duck.
That's right.
And the thing about Oswald, I've got the Warren Commission checked out from the library in my house, sort of on permanent hold. And I've been...
Warren Commission...
This thing about Patrolman Marion L. Baker, who's in the motorcycle, who hears the shots. He's coming around onto Elm Street, but he hears what he thinks is something in the Texas book depository. He runs inside, finds Roy Trulley, the superintendent. They run upstairs, and they find Oswald on the second floor in the cafeteria room.
Drinking a Coca-Cola, getting a Coke, with no elevator in the building.
Right, and he's not out of breath.
Yeah, and another person coming down the steps that didn't pass Oswald on the way. She's going up, and he didn't come down the steps.
And that would have been the only way he could have come down.
And he's on the second floor. Yes.
And he's not out of breath, and they come over, and the guy draws a gun on him, but he's not even sure what he's looking for. And Oswald comes up, and he says, "Who are you?" And he's not out of breath, and he's not uncomfortable talking to them. But it's just like, like your kind of thing. This horrible thing about making this be a museum now where you come upstairs and see where Lee was when he pulled the trigger. It's so sickening that the facts are are just so completely obfuscated.
Yeah, it really tears my heart. That's why I put aside all the other news. There's tons of stuff on Iran from Mies, Deaver, Gary Hart. I couldn't even touch it because this is so symptomatic of 24 years now, and on the 25th year, you can see where he stood. You can see where the rifle was. You can see the window. So what if there was a window? Roger Craig, the sheriff, said he left the depositories running down the knoll getting in a car.
Right.
Another person testified and died shortly afterwards that he left from the back of the building. He couldn't have been leaving from two places.
Right, exactly.
And he gets in the car of Ruth Payne. He says it involved the Paynes, but then they'll know who I am.
Right.
I wrote that in the People's Almanac for the Wallaces, Almanac number 2, I think it is, 2 or 3. It is so indecent, it is so horrendous to duplicate, because once generations go through, this is where he stood. Nothing about how he got the job. Ruth Payne called up Roy Trulley and arranged for him to get the job there. And the same day, October the 20th, 1963, in the Warren Commission hearings, he got a job at Love Airfield on the same day. So if the motorcade didn't come down Elm Street, he could have been the fall guy, and he could have been the Oswald on the paychecks of Love Airfield.
At the airport.
And yet there's no monument at Love Airfield of where he stood, and they're taking history and grinding it, absolutely chewing it up and cementing the big lie into and this book, this artwork of him with the pistol. It's so tragic how our country has literally been destroyed with lies.
Yeah, with that kind of thing. In Torvid, he speaks of this guy, William Seymour.
Yes.
Who's the guy who runs out the back and runs into the car.
Yeah, and William Seymour was a dead ringer for Oswald.
Exactly.
Too. Yeah.
Now, what other lines do you have on published stuff about Seymour?
Well, the Torpid document, I believe, goes into it. There's quite a bit. I can't remember which books deal with Seymour now, although he is written at length and was one of the doubles. That's one of the things I'd like to get done by the 25th anniversary of the shooting of Kennedy, is my book on the doubles, because how one leaves the front and one leaves the back and one works at the airport. The doubles has never been fully explained, and everything in the book, and it's ready to roll and put together now, isn't anything that's come out since 1964. It was in the 26 volumes of the Warren Commission hearings, so the investigators, including Gerald Ford, all knew it then.
At the time.
At the time, and wrote the report knowing about Seymour being a dead ringer for him, and all the other dead ringers that were in different cities. When he was in one place, they were in another.
Setting him up.
Yeah.
Well, keep it up. You're doing a great job.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. This is Mae Brussell, 375-3082. Call, and look, we've got this nice board tonight you can get on. I've got my voice, and we have the phone patch is working, so call in and tell me what you're thinking about. The year is winding down. Next week will be the last broadcast of this year. A lot happened this year. My goodness, our heads are spinning from it all. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, Mae.
Hi.
Listen, I have some information. I've been poking around on this thing with these daycare centers.
Okay.
And I now have information linking the Neuropsychiatric Institute in L.A., which is run by Dr. Jolly West, to the McMartin Preschool.
Oh, my goodness. Where did you find that?
Well, there's this person named Dennis Clark. Now, he's the national spokesman for the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. Now, he was the man on the Oprah Winfrey show warning people about psychiatric electroshock.
Oh, yeah, I taped that somewhere. I have a copy, yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, well, Clark gave a speech in Palo Alto in the spring of this year, which a friend of mine went to. And Clark said that about 2 years ago, the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, which, by the way, investigates psychiatrists who are involved with criminal activity, they were trying to get this boy out of the custody of the Neuropsychiatric Institute down at UCLA. Apparently, the psychiatrist had sort of tricked his parents into turning over legal custody to the psychiatrist.
Yeah, this is sort of like Jim Jones, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, they had the boy held there, and then they were drugging him, and the parents then became alarmed, but according to the law, they no longer had control of the child, so they went to the Citizens Commission.
Uh-huh.
The Citizens Commission had a lawsuit against the psychiatrist there to get the legal control put back in the hands of the parents. Now, the psychiatrists, we're getting a lot of pressure against them, and we're starting to get sort of back off. And so they said that they would agree to let the boy go, but they tried to put a stipulation in the court that if they let go of custody of the boy, that he then had to be turned over during the day to legal custody of the McMartin preschool.
You're kidding.
No, that's true.
Really? Well, yeah, that's down near Long Beach. That's pretty far away, but the family lived there or what?
No, they didn't. This was in L.A., but
they had to be turned over to the McMartin school.
During the daytime.
Yes.
Now, they refused to go along with any of the stipulations of the psychiatrist without particularly realizing what the significance was.
The UCLA school, run by Jolly West.
That's the Neuropsychiatric Institute.
Yeah, that was Jack Ruby's psychologist who said there was a 1-minute epilepsy instead of a larger conspiracy. The UCLA recommended McMartin School.
This is the Neuropsychiatric Institute tried to put that in as a legal stipulation.
I wonder how many other psychiatric institutes did that. I see the fellow that's been in jail that runs that school got out this week on $3 million bail. He's out. $3 million was put out for him to be out on the streets now while his trial is pending. That's a pretty high bail, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. For the only thing skinned was animals, we hope. I don't know if there were human sacrifices. I heard it came close to it. Somebody from McMartin spoke up in San Francisco at that conference. But $3 million bail for nursery school Satanism is pretty high. Well, my goodness, this is amazing. I'll have to follow that through with you. Maybe let me see. We have to go off take another call now. Call me at the house, and maybe I can get the phone number of Dennis Clark and whatever city he's in, where he is, and talk to him about this.
Okay. There's a little bit more here that may be relevant.
Yeah, real fast.
They've been drugging these children with a drug called Ritalin.
Yeah.
The Neuropsychiatric Institute is involved with promoting this. This has gotten quite widespread in the public schools.
Uh-huh.
Now, you had said, you'd quoted that these children that had been abducted by these satanic people running these daycare centers for the Army were injecting children.
Yeah, with drugs, that's right.
Now, this is going on in public schools, supposedly to treat nervousness in children.
Uh-huh.
They drug the children with a drug called Ritalin. Now, in Operation Mind Control by Walter Board, he says that the CIA was interested in Ritalin in the 50s because the drug was thought to hold great promise for mind control applications.
Oh, boy.
Now, in the state of Minnesota, in some schools, as many as 20% of the children between kindergarten and grade 8 in some schools are being forcibly drugged with Ritalin by psychiatrists.
Oh, boy. Yeah, boy. You know, this, I had an argument with one of my best friends here on the peninsula whose daughter is the same age as my daughter when she went to Carmel High, and they insisted that she get, it wasn't Ritalin, it was some other medications. I don't know the name of what she got. but they thought she was too active or too happy or having too much fun or not sitting in class properly. And at Carmel High, they had her mother take her to a doctor and get prescriptions, and she'd come, with her tongue hanging out, sort of like Proloxin and these psychiatric drugs, and they told her this is what she'd have to be at Carmel High. And I just had a big fight with her mother, and we used to be good friends, and we except to say hello once or every year or so if we bump into each other. We haven't had much to do because I told her that she absolutely should get this child off. The child was absolutely normal, and there was no reason in the world for her to be going to a psychiatrist to get this kind of medication. And now she's grown up, married, and a very fine, darling person in our own community was sending them to doctors to get this kind of medication.
Well, it's really creepy, but it does show it's going on quite widespread in the public schools.
And it's going on not only with Jolly West works with the Indians and the blacks and the Chicanos and does his experiments on third world type of people, but it goes on right in our own community to shape people up into some kind of zombies that will fit into the mold of what everybody's supposed to look like and talk alike, and think alike. And it's happening right in our own area and all around the country.
Now, there are some articles that go into this in this month's issue of Freedom.
Uh-huh.
And they talk about the Citizens Commission in there and Ritalin and the CIA investigating it for mind control.
Okay, I didn't get this last issue. I'm sure it'll be coming, so I'll wait and see. Thank you very much.
You didn't get that?
No, it should be coming. They stopped for a while.
I got this about 2 weeks ago.
Well, I'll write down and see. Okay, thank you for calling.
Sure.
Okay. Well, okay, a link between Jolly West, his institute to study the causes of violent behavior, was set up by Ronald Reagan when he was governor of California, and they were doing experiments and electrodes on third world people and prisoners at that time. Hello, you're on the air.
I have a question, and then I'll take my answer at the air.
Sure.
It has to do with the fact that there's been not very many launch vehicles actually make it up in the United States in the last 9 months.
Yeah.
And the fact that suddenly the Russians come with a peace offer when it seems like we're throwing away all of our new hardware.
And so we'll go to Mars with you, you mean?
Well, somebody suggested on KKUP that actually the Russians had a primitive but working laser in space, and that the Challenger and a few others were actually target practice. And the United States can't get anything up right now.
We'll see. If I have a trouble watching Russia because I have trouble watching us, and it's easy to watch us, and if the Challenger were sent down, if everything we did were right, you want to take it off the air? Okay. If everything we did was right, then I would look to Russia to sabotage what we do is right. But a year before the Challenger blew up, there were memos and hearings that it would not be able to take off under a certain temperature that the seal wouldn't hold the booster rocket. And under cold temperature, it wasn't advisable to go because this would cause the explosion that happened. And when the Challenger was to go off on a Saturday, that was a scheduled date. George Bush was down there. It was a very warm day, and they could have gone, and they didn't go that day when it was warm. Sunday was the Super Bowl. It was warm, and they didn't go that day. The next day, it was obvious to the weather reports that a cold wave was coming in, and the newspaper accounts that I have said that they would have to wait till Thursday or so because it was too cold. The booster rocket wouldn't hold under the cold weather, and yet with the coldest that they ever launched, there was a telephone conversation between Huntsville and Utah and Morton Theocol, and changing the opinions on what was safe, and the people working with NASA that said adamantly it won't work and it can't go, and somebody demanding it to go. Now, if we waited till the warmest day and went either Saturday or Sunday or Monday or then the next Thursday, that would be okay. But being as we went against the requirements of the way the booster rocket was made, I don't have to look to Russia for blowing it up because we did what we weren't supposed to do according to our own scientists who weren't Russian. So I think we have to look at ourselves and not always look at the other guy because that's so convenient. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, Mae.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I've been listening to you for 5 or 6 years, and I really appreciate what you're doing. And but lately you've been making a lot of comments about psychedelic drugs.
Yep.
And at the same time, almost in the same breath that you make the comments on the psychedelic drugs, which are basically all negative, and that nothing ever good comes out of them, they just scramble your brains, you'll put on John Lennon, you know, and you'll cite, you know, other people who have experimented, like Aldous Huxley, you know, who definitely were good people and who definitely felt the psychedelic drug gave them insight into reality and into their lives and into themselves.
Well, I can appreciate Lennon, the artist, like I can read Robinson Jeffers, or I can see a painting of Picasso or Salvador Dali. That doesn't mean that what Lennon did with his life was enhanced, maybe a song or two. But they got their musical start before they had the drugs. The drugs were introduced to them in the United States.
But, Mae, you can talk to the Beatles, I mean, the surviving Beatles, and they will tell you that the turning point in their career, where they went from a silly little pop band making funny little songs about I Want to Hold Your Hand, into a band that actually wanted to talk about experience, about reality, about this life, this crazy life we're living in here, how paradoxical and chaotic what everyone considers the status quo is, you know?
Okay, look at the Beatles today. There was an interview, was it on Nightline with George Harrison about 3 weeks ago? If those brains didn't look like cauliflower and cabbages mashed in a blender, the man talks like a fool. I tape record if you want me to type it up verbatim. He said absolutely nothing, as if two fingers...
Well, we all talk like fools sometimes.
No. In a time, he was the one who studied the spiritualism and so forth, and I don't believe that what they did didn't damage them as adults going into maturity now. They are totally inappropriate for the conditions.
Well, Mae, some people would listen to you and what you said and say you're totally inappropriate and say you're crazy. It's all from your perspective. And what I'm saying is, you got to be open. You got to be open to this thing. Obviously, you haven't tried any of these drugs, and you know the whole media cranked out that whole the drugs are the problem. You know, like Nancy Reagan and them. Drugs are the problem. You know, drugs are not the problem.
Okay,
it's human evil.
No. What I'm talking about is I researched these 23 years are specific problems in our society that are dangerous, whether they're poisons or the CIA inducing cancer, or our brutality in these countries that we take over, the death squads. And I'm listening for voices that offer us alternatives to stop the insanity. And I don't hear them from people who should be coming forward. And I believe that this generation has literally been wiped out for most purposes, or maybe the brighter ones, of speaking up. There is a inappropriate silence. And if drugs enlighten so many people, why don't they get off their butts and form an army that says enough? It's like the parents up in Berkeley that started the organization Enough child molesting, enough preschool Nazism, Satanism, missing children, child sacrifices, human sacrifices. Enough. I'm waiting for any voice of reason. And if those soldiers that want to change things that are really bad have had the drugs, then I'd say the drugs haven't made any difference. But I hear nothing but a wall of silence. And I say, what good did it do towards society? Maybe for themselves, their place in mind may be a little more interesting for sounds and whatever. But what have they done to make society a little better? Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, Mae. This is Steve in Santa Cruz. I'm a little under the weather, so I hope my voice is coming through relatively clear.
Okay.
I was going to, one of your callers way back when described interesting things about the occult that I thought that was an interesting conversation for purposes of semantics and other things like that. Occult basically literally means hidden. So people who are occultists believe that there is this sort of hidden knowledge of kind of how the universe works. And by interacting with that hidden knowledge, you can do various things, and for good or for ill, depending on what your bent is. Now, my approach to the whole thing is it leans much more towards, scholarly sorts of things like that. However, the point he made of Satanism as being specific from a whole range, being a specific part that's different from a whole range of occult practices is correct, in the same way that Islam is a separate religion from Christianity, which is a separate religion from animism. And I think that, all these things have to be approached with some care.
Yes.
Basically, because one of the things that happens is you get this thing started where people get all emotional about it, and people will also, and, some of the less than fun people in the occult universe, even though they don't mean any harm, will sort of, pander to this by doing, various things to quote, spreading various rumors to quote, freak out the straights, or they love to tell people, well, I have these great magic powers, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, I think maybe what I was referring to, and he made a point, was I was referring to the satanics that were part of a cult, but not all the occult. There is a difference, and I accept the difference, and maybe it has to be more defined, so that when it's like a lot of people think when I talk about the CIA in mind control or medical experiments, about it's not every agent of the CIA. When I talk that Israel behaves like a Nazi country, I mean the people, the far right power in Israel, not the ordinary people on the kibbutzim. It isn't a collective Israel or a collective CIA or a collective FBI. It's specific people in the organizations that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think that that's very important, and I would temper reading. I have sort of divided feelings about Ravenscroft, and some of it's pretty good, and some of it's kind of out there. And I sort of like people like Alec Howe, who's a British historian of ideas, who wrote a book called Astrology in the Third Reich. He was also
yeah, I have that book too.
Yeah, and he wrote the other one called The Magicians of the Golden Dawn, which is an interesting sort of scholarly description of a certain sort of magical order that originated in 1890, in the 1890s and early part of the beginning of this century.
Yeah, were you aware that Himmler had the Bureau of the Occult as part of the Third Reich?
Yeah, he was very interested in it so much that he set out to, as Hal and other people described, he set out to actually suppress, astrologers and occultists in Germany who weren't involved with, in the power structure, because he wanted only, people in the power structure to be able to deal with that. And he didn't want other people out in the outer, out of the power structure saying anything or what they were really afraid of, spreading any rumors.
Well, he was a genius. It's like in the story of Pure Blood and the Liebersborn. He would take children that came from pure blood Christian families and kill both parents because he only wanted what the child could learn and didn't want any input from the parents.
Yeah, and one of the things that they did want to create was this, you could, I don't know whether you describe it as a religion, but I'd certainly describe it as a new philosophy or a new, I don't pronounce German very well either, but Weltanschauung, worldview.
Yeah.
And what they specifically set out to get rid of were the compassionate, soft and lenient parts.
Yeah, well, this is one of the
Christianity.
Yeah, this is what I had on the air about 2 weeks ago under the mind of Himmler. He thought that he was doing his Gestapo a favor by running the camps and the police like he did, because by making them tough, they could serve better the purpose, and he had to eliminate the warm feelings that might have been in them.
Yeah, and you can trace a lot of that. You can see that. You can sort of go and not those ideas exactly, but you can see some of those ideas coming out of the lesser pleasant parts of Nietzsche.
Yeah. also with fraternities, the raising or the initiation into the death's head, these societies, they do some terrible things involved with death and murder and sacrifice to erase from you that compassion.
And the other thing that they like, that when people do, talking about psychological warfare, specifically in a trying to still remain in a relatively calm state about it, is that one of the things that lots of these things, or even rumors of these things, which was a lot of it is rumors that they do when they're in these initiatory things in psychological warfare, is to spread fear and terror and to scare people.
I know. Listen, I've got to run along. Our time is up.
I should run along. I should let you run along. Have fun. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, it was nice. They changed the board here and everything's hunky-dory. We're in a very sensitive area when I talk about drugs, because there is a younger generation that defends them, says, look, I'm just fine, look at me, I'm great. It has broadened my vision of the world, and maybe it has. I think of people I knew who, before they were into drugs, such as Paul Krasner, who really had a sharp, enthusiastic mind, who was literally wiped out. He traveled out here with Ken Kesey, stayed at his place. After One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Kesey did practically nothing. He was into the great drug cult, and no one around him with the acid, cool acid test or anything became philosophers, changers of society. And I think of Timothy Leary and Abby Hoffman, and these people that were so gleeful, look at me, take all the drugs you want, turn on, and so forth, who, to meet the challenges of the 60s, and goodness knows we have them, have done absolutely nothing. They don't recognize them, they talk silly about them, and I can't see that it expanded their awareness at all. Well, my time is up now. I'm going to close. This is Mae Brussell. The previous hour of World Watchers has been made possible in part by Lowdown, a leading manufacturer of microcomputer peripherals located in Scotts Valley and available by calling 438-7400. The views expressed are those of myself and do not necessarily reflect the views of Kazoo staff or board of directors. This is KAZU, Pacific Grove, Carmel, Santa Cruz.